Welcome to the Conan Fitness Platinum webinar. This time we're looking at sleep and its effect on body composition. Have you ever actually wondered what happens when you sleep? You know you can't live without it. You can't even function properly when you don't have enough of it. But what actually happens? And how important is it? And just how significantly does it affect our health and our fitness goals? Well, what we're looking at specifically is the significance and prevalence of sleep loss, so how much it actually happens in our society today, and its chronic effect on things like appetite and emotion, fat loss and body composition, and even the neurobehavioral performance, or basically how you perform. Then at the end of that, we'll look at some suggestions for trying to optimize sleep. Previously, we've kind of, like a long time ago, regarded sleep as a fairly simple and inactive or passive type state that's, basically unresponsive or disengaged. But with the whole EEG thing, the whole electroencephalograph, checking out what happens on when someone sleeps, we realise that it's certainly a lot more than that. A lot's going on. In fact, so much so that it's imperative to our functioning. They've done studies comparing the negative effects of sleep and its association to the negative effects of alcohol intoxication. They find that it's actually quality and quantity can actually be measured, and the neurobehavioral impairments can be measured. They find that neurobehavioral detriment of somewhere in the vicinity of 20 to 25 hours of wakefulness, so being awake that long, have been shown to produce the equivalent impairment of a blood alcohol reading of about 0.1. Now that's double what is accepted for being able to drive. Yet there's pretty strict laws on driving and driving under the influence, but when it comes to working or performing or just doing your average job, there's no such laws in place to do with sleep deprivation, even though that's twice as bad as being able to drive a car. And obviously, it's a bit harder to measure in things like work and situations just because of sleep loss. But this is how detrimental it can be. And what are the causes? Well, there's so many. I mean, with societal factors like technology, stimulants, availability of just 24-hour activity, which never existed 100 years ago. Obviously, high demands and things like insomnia and sleep apnea. It all affects not just our duration of sleep, but quality as well. So if this is looking at effects of, our neurobehavioral impairment, what about our body and body composition? Well, some of the things to do with prevalence and significance. We know that 80% of Australians experience some sort of issue with sleeping that negatively impacts their waking life. That's a lot of people. 30% have some sort of severe disorder, and almost 10% are using tablets or some sort of sleeping aid to cope with the rising rate of sleep debt. In the work context, in the corporate world, more than half of our Australian workforce that were surveyed don't get enough sleep. So how does that impact us? Effects and symptoms. What we know is that other than your typical mid-morning yawn and maybe a bit of daytime drowsiness, how do you know when we're lacking sleep? Well, what we find, other than things like that, irritability, increased risks of falls and accidents, poor decision making, low productivity, moodiness, even impairment in memory, things like this. What we find is that a sleep-deprived person can actually experience periods throughout the day when they get close to falling asleep, and they go into what we call these mini or micro sleeps. These micro sleeps are typically 5 to 10 seconds. It's basically a lapse in attention. You literally nod off, for a few seconds during things of activity. It could be reading or driving a car or trying to concentrate on something. And they can also experience dreamlike hallucinations, and we've probably all done it at one point in time or another. And that's a really clear sign that the body is typically sleep deprived, and that it's not quite getting enough. People experiencing insufficient sleep, they are also more likely to suffer from certain chronic diseases like hypertension, diabetes, depression, obesity, even cancer, and increased mortality has been associated with just because of sleep deprivation. Sleep is so important in optimizing immune system, nervous system, and hormone release that impairments in sleep or curtailment of sleep affects all of these things to a significant amount. And where we're going to start getting into more depth right now is how sleep loss significantly modifies energy intake and expenditure. So if the amount of sleep we get and quality of sleep we get has an effect on our energy intake and energy expenditure, then it's going to significantly affect our body composition. So firstly, a bit about sleep needs. Well, they say that, the school-age children, most literature at the moment is saying that about 10 to 11 hours they need. Teenagers, somewhere in the vicinity of 8.5 to 9.5 hours, and I say adults somewhere in the vicinity of 7 to 9 hours. And that's quite a range. In general, most adults seem to function best, and obviously there's quite a large variation between person to person, but typically they function best with about 16 hours of wakefulness and about 7 to 8 hours of night of sleep. This is the cycles. So there are 5 main cycles that happen while we sleep. The highest, or the first level of sleep, basically REM sleep is rapid eye movement is what it stands for. And then there's 4 levels of non-REM sleep, or non-rapid eye movement sleep, that just go through progressively deeper and deeper levels of sleep where you're harder to wake. And REM sleep is called that typically because our eyes literally move back and forth quite rapidly under the eyelids, hence the name. It's also the period of time when you do most of your dreaming. A lot of people think that happens in really deep levels of sleep, but most of it happens in the shallow levels of sleep, like REM. And the amount of cycles that you can see there that we go through in a night depends on the length of sleep duration, and also how much you need each stage of sleep, because the body will preferentiate which areas it needs the most, but typically in the range of 3 to 5 cycles a night. In this stage, in REM sleep, heart rate increases actually, and so does blood pressure. Your breathing is quite rapid and irregular, and getting really good REM sleep helps with mood throughout the next day. Once we get into stage 1 and stage 2, that's mostly drowsiness, and the eyes start to the eye movement slow down, and then even begins to stop, or even stops. And stages 3 and 4, that's deep sleep. That's where you're hard to wake, and if you do wake, you'll be really groggy and disorientated. In this stage, blood flow actually increases to the muscles, and it's a stage where muscle energy and physical energy is restored. Hence the importance of deep or really slow wave sleep. The deep slow wave also helps immune function. So understanding these cycles explains to us the difference between quantity and quality. So even though someone might get the quantity, the hours of sleep, if it's bad quality, as in they're interrupted or they're constantly waking for some reason, then these cycles don't get a chance to cover all stages, and therefore there'll be a significant lack in the quality of sleep. Likewise, if there's good quality but the duration just isn't there, then it just doesn't get the opportunity to go through the cycles, and again we've got insufficient sleep. So how does this affect us on a hormonal level, and these hormone levels being the important factor we're talking about with body composition? Well, the first is that there's a study done that all it was a few weeks of moderate calorie restriction with either 8.5 or 5.5 hours of nighttime sleep. So the difference in the study was 3 hours worth of sleep, basically, and the calories were controlled. Now, what they found, that in the time period, the two groups, those on 8.5 hours and those on 5.5 hours, they actually lost the same amount of weight in this calorie-reduced state. But what they found is that the amount of weight loss in the sleep-deprived people that actually came from fat was over 55% less. So of the amount of weight that they lost, or the amount of weight was the same as the normal group, but over 55% less was fat, meaning it came from somewhere else, and they found that the proportion of weight loss as fat-free mass or muscle was over 60% more. So just because of the sleep deprivation, even though they lost weight, most of it came from muscle and not as much came from fat. And if you know how that affects us later on down the track, it's very significant. What they also found is that this was accompanied by markers of enhanced neuroendocrine adaptation to calorie restriction. So, and that just means that the body was getting adapted to the calorie restriction by things like increased hunger and a shift in the substrate utilization for energy. So what was being burned for energy? Was it carbohydrates or fat? It was pushed away from using fat. So these people in this state, as they go on through their day, they're preferentiating carbohydrate or glucose instead of fat oxidation for the energy that they're using. The conclusion of it, as you can see down here, is that the amount of human sleep contributes to the maintenance of fat-free body mass at times of decreased energy intake. So by decreasing energy intake, the amount of sleep we get, or getting enough sleep, helps to preserve the muscle mass that we have, and lack of sufficient sleep may compromise the efficacy of typical dietary interventions. So even though someone's trying to lose weight, with lack of sleep, they're really pushing up a steep hill. This next study showed that slow wave sleep, that's the deeper levels of sleep, secrete hormones that stimulate growth and tissue repair. So if we're not getting the quality and not getting into those deeper levels of sleep, then we're missing out on lots of opportunity for recovery, muscle growth, things like that. With cortisol and dopamine, when someone wakes up to face their day and they've had insufficient sleep, we know that cortisol is a little higher, and cortisol, produces is generally prevalent with adrenaline, and it helps to produce glucose to help you function, because you're in a kind of stressed state. And while it helps you, it's stress based, and that's a discomfort. It's an uncomfortable feeling for the body. So what it does is, it knows that it gives you cravings, because, when you have things like sugar or whatever it is that someone wants that gives them that pleasure hit, anything that they can go to that's quick and easy, and that secretes dopamine. And dopamine's, the nice pleasurable hormone that kind of like puts the fire out on the discomfort from cortisol and stress. So what we're going to be having is higher cravings, basically being pushed to find things that are quick, easy fixes and give us that dopamine hit, and just satiate that fire of cortisol sort of thing. Also, cortisol preferentiates visceral fat deposition, which just means if fat's going to be deposited, it preferentiates around the belly or gut area, in the visceral area, certainly where we don't want it from a health perspective. Then we get to the real kicker. So far it sounds like, well, we're really pushing up a hill to get fat loss in a sleep-deprived state. And then comes along our two master hormones, ghrelin and leptin, that significantly impact our energy balance. Leptin is a hormone that is secreted by fat cells. So when energy balance is high, meaning you've got lots of calories coming in and you're not doing much, so there's a positive energy balance making you, tend towards putting on weight. Leptin is high, and leptin makes you feel full, so it's an appetite suppressant, and it makes you feel active, so you increase energy expenditure. So it makes you burn more and eat less. Ghrelin is pretty much the opposite. When ghrelin is high, that's in states where energy balance is low, you haven't eaten for a long period of time, or just low energy balance. And ghrelin is an orexigenic hormone, meaning anorexigenic is making you not want to eat. Orexigenic is an appetite stimulant. It makes you feel hungry, feel cravings, and it also promotes inactivity, meaning, lethargic, I can't be bothered doing anything. So it makes you not burn calories because your energy balance is too low. And what this study by Tahiri found was literally a direct correlation between the quantity of sleep, or the hours of sleep, and the levels of ghrelin and leptin. And they found that as sleep was reduced, leptin was lower and ghrelin was higher, which is like this double whammy effect of hormones in your body saying do less, eat more. And that's a pretty strong effect on our energy balance and long-term body composition. So how can we try and get this in our favor instead of against us? Well, for sleep optimization, just a couple of things. And the first is probably just common sense, meaning prioritize. Because, when we don't value it that much, sleep, when we're busy, when we're stressed, maybe it's a work thing, or, a parenthood thing, you got children, or, there's a lot on the plate. Sometimes sleep takes the back seat just because, it's not easy in our modern day of high demands. But if we can focus on, say, all right, I get now that it's pretty important, not just for health, but also body composition, all those sorts of things like behavioral factors. So just prioritize it. Get to bed early enough to rack up the right amount of sleep by morning. Your circadian rhythm, the body likes to have a rhythm. The body likes to go to bed at the same time each night and wake up at the same time each morning. And I've said it before where people say, oh, if I get up early to train in the morning, to exercise, maybe I should only do that, say 3 days of the week, then at least gives me 2 to sleep in, because sleep's important, right? My suggestion is that the body would prefer to get up the same time every morning and not have 3 mornings where it's early and 2 mornings of the work week when it's later. It actually prefers to get up, even if you're not getting up to exercise, get up at the same time, and it just means try to get to bed early or early enough and generally at the same time. So for people who are shift workers, they always have problems in this, and it's there's no easy answer to that. It's a really tough situation. Shift work really throws a spanner in the works when it comes to the circadian rhythm. Where it says dark and cool, just again common sense. You want to turn the lights off. Even those little the things that glow. All of our technological apparatus we have in the bedroom. Turn everything off, because it all affects the body. There are light sensors that that can sense light even when your eyes are closed. So turn it all off, even just on your skin. Cool. Even though hot can sometimes make you drowsy, having the room slightly cool will help you get a better sleep, as opposed to being in a hot room. Minimize noise, things that are common sense. Stimulants, obviously you want to avoid caffeine and alcohol and nicotine, all that sort of stuff before bedtime. And exercise, exercise regularly, and even exercise before going to bed. However, if it's really intense exercise right before bed, some people find that disrupt sleep, as in they can't get to sleep because they're too much on a high. Really excites the sympathetic nervous system. So maybe not so intense right before bedtime. Leave the intense training for the morning. Some people handle it fine. They train intense and sleep like a log, but just see what's right for you. So there you have it, folks. The importance of sleep for behavioral factors as well as body composition. Get the right amount of sleep. Do what you can to get quality sleep. And until next time, train hard, play smart, and bring out the warrior within. Thanks.